Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UFS Horizon, watching the stars through the large window. His hands were clasped behind his back, the way he always stood when he was thinking hard about something. The ship was moving through space toward Nexus Prime, a big space station where many different alien races came to talk and make deals. Jake had been a captain for 15 years, but this mission felt different, more important, more dangerous. He could feel it in his bones, the same way his grandfather used to say he could feel storms coming back on Earth. The bridge was quiet except for the soft humming of the ship's engines. His crew worked at their stations, checking systems and watching for any problems. These were good people, Jake thought. It's the best humanity had to offer. They had all been chosen carefully for this mission, not just because they were skilled, but because they could control themselves. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Davis walked up to Jake's side. Ryan was a big man with dark hair and calm eyes. He had been Jake's second in command for 3 years, and Jake trusted him completely. "Captain, we'll reach Nexus Prime in 6 hours," Ryan said quietly. "Ambassador Carter wants to meet with you before we dock." Jake nodded. "Tell her I'll be in the conference room in 10 minutes. Ryan walked away, and Jake took one more look at the stars. Out there, somewhere, were hundreds of alien races. Most of them thought humans were weak, soft, easy to push around. For 30 years, humanity had worked very hard to make sure they kept thinking that way. The conference room was small and simple, with a long table and chairs for 12 people. Ambassador Lisa Carter was already there, reading through files on her tablet. She was a woman in her 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been talking to aliens for most of her adult life, and she was very good at it. "Captain Morrison," she said as Jake walked in, "please sit down. We need to talk about what's going to happen when we reach the station." Jake sat across from her. "The Zilithians." "Yes, High Commander Vextel will be leading their delegation. He's not like the other Zilithians we've dealt with before. He's more aggressive, more direct in his opinions about humanity." Jake had read the files about Vextel. The Zilithian was 8 feet tall, covered in green scales, with teeth like knives and claws that could cut through metal. His species had conquered 12 star systems in the past 100 years. They were strong, fast, and they had no patience for creatures they saw as weak. "What are they offering?" Jake asked. Lisa touched her tablet, and a map appeared on the wall screen. It showed 3 star systems marked in red. They want exclusive mining rights to the Kepler 442 system. In return, they're willing to let us have limited trading access to these 3 systems. Jake looked at the map. The Kepler 442 system had more rare metals than any other system humans had found. Those metals were needed to build the advanced technology that kept human colonies safe. Without them, humanity would fall behind other races in just a few years. "And if we say no?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "They block our expansion into 3 sectors. No new colonies. No new trade routes. They've made it clear that other races will follow their lead if they decide humanity isn't worth dealing with." The door opened, and Dr. Alex Turner walked in. Alex was a thin man with brown hair and glasses who always looked like he was thinking about something complicated. He was the mission's chief scientist, but Jake knew his real job was much more important than that, Dr. Lisa said. "Perfect timing. I was just explaining the situation to Captain Morrison." Alex sat down and put his own tablet on the table. "The situation is worse than Ambassador Carter is telling you, Captain. The Zilithians aren't just trying to get a good deal. They're testing us." "Testing us how?" Jake asked. Alex touched his tablet, and new information appeared on the wall screen. "They've been watching human colonies for months, sending small ships to our border systems, watching how we react to their presence. We're trying to figure out if we'll fight back if they push us too far." Jake felt something cold in his stomach. What have they learned? That we always back down? That we always try to talk instead of fight? That we value peace more than anything else? Alex looked directly at Jake. "They think we're cowards." The 3 humans sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, Jake could see Nexus Prime getting bigger as they got closer. The space station was huge, built by a dozen different races. working together. It was supposed to be a symbol of peace and cooperation in the galaxy. Captain, Lisa said finally, you know why we were all chosen for this mission? You know what we're hiding? Jake nodded. Every person on his ship had been tested, not just for their skills, but for their ability to control their deepest instincts. Humans had spent 300 years learning to be civilized, learning to be better than their nature, learning to hide what they really were. Dr. Alex Turner's real job was to remind them all why they had to keep hiding it. Azalithians have no idea what Earth is really like, Alex said quietly. They think it's a garden world, paradise where peaceful creatures evolve to be gentle and kind. They don't know the truth. Jake had been born on Earth, in a city called Denver. He remembered the mountains, the thin air that made other aliens need breathing masks, the storms that could kill you if you were caught outside. He remembered his grandfather's stories about the old days, when humans fought wars that killed millions of people, when they hunted animals that were bigger and stronger than them, just because they could. The crew knows what we're doing here, Jake asked. Hey, know enough, Alex said. They know that we're playing a role, that we're pretending to be something we're not. They've all agreed to keep playing that role, no matter what the Zilithians say or do. Lisa stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Nexus Prime was close enough now that they could see ships. From many different races docked at the station, Zilithians will try to make us angry. They'll insult us, threaten us, maybe even hurt us. That's their way. They believe that strength is the only thing that matters, and they want to prove that we don't have any. And we let them, Jake said. We let them, Lisa agreed, because the alternative is war. And if there's a war... She didn't finish the sentence, but Jake knew what she meant. If there was a war, humans would win. They would win fast, and they would win completely, and when it was over. Every other race in the galaxy would know the truth about humanity, that they weren't gentle creatures from a paradise world. They were predators from a planet that tried to kill everything that lived on it. They were the descendants of hunters who had chased their prey across continents, who had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that would have destroyed any other species. They were Deathworlders, who had learned to wear masks. Captain Ryan's voice came through the communication system. We're being contacted by Nexus Prime. They're ready for us to dock. Jake stood up. Thank you, Commander. Begin docking procedures. He looked at Lisa and Alex. Remember, everyone, we're diplomats. We're peaceful. We're civilized. The three humans left the conference room and walked toward the docking bay. Outside the windows, Jake could see Zilithian ships waiting for them. Big dark vessels covered in weapons and armor. Ships built by a race that had never learned to hide what they were. Soon, Jake thought, they would meet High Commander Vextal face to face. The Zilithians would try to prove that humans were weak. And Jake and his crew would smile and nod and agree, because that was what civilized people did. Even when every instinct in their bodies was screaming at them to show the Zilithians what happened when you threatened a human's family. The docking bay of Nexus Prime was massive, big enough to hold ships from 20 different worlds. Jake Morrison walked down the ramp of the UFS Horizon with his diplomatic team beside him. The artificial gravity felt lighter than Earth normal, and the air smelled of metal and recycled atmosphere. Ambassador Lisa Carter walked on his right side, her face calm and professional. Dr. Alex Turner was on his left, carrying a case full of files and data tablets. Behind them came 6 other members of the human delegation, all chosen for their ability to stay quiet and polite no matter what happened to them. The Zilithian delegation was waiting for them in the center of the docking bay. Of Zilithians before, but seeing them in person was different. They were huge, each one standing at least 8 feet tall. Their green scales caught the light from the ceiling, and their yellow eyes watched the humans like a cat watching mice. Hi. Commander Vextal stood in front of the other Zilithians. He was bigger than the rest, with scars on his face and arms that told stories of battles he had won. When he smiled, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth that were designed for tearing meat. So, Vextal said, his voice deep and rough, these are the famous humans, the species that thinks it deserves a place in the Galactic Council. His words were translated by a small device on his chest, but Jake could hear the mockery in his tone, even without understanding the alien language. Lisa stepped forward and bowed slightly. The way humans had learned to greet other species. "Commander Vextel, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We hope these negotiations will benefit both our peoples." Vextel laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Benefit both our peoples. Little mammal, you have nothing we need. We are here because the Council requires it, not because we want anything from you." Jake felt his jaw muscles tighten, but he kept his face neutral. Beside him, he could sense Dr. Turner taking slow, deep breaths. Ryan Davis, who had joined them from the ship, stood perfectly still. But Jake knew him well enough to see the tension in his shoulders. They were escorted through the station to a large conference room with a round table. The walls were made of some kind of clear material that showed the stars outside. Ships from dozens of different worlds moved past the windows like colorful fish in a vast ocean. The negotiations began immediately. Lisa presented humanity's proposal for shared mining rights in the Kepler 442 system. She spoke clearly and calmly, explaining how both species could benefit from working together. Her voice never changed, even when Vextel interrupted her with insults and threats. "You speak of sharing," Vextel said, leaning back in his chair, which groaned under his weight. "But what do humans have to share? You are weak, your ships are small, your weapons are primitive. Your colonies are so poorly defended that the Silithian ship could destroy them." Dr. Turner opened his mouth to respond, but Lisa touched his arm gently. The message was clear. Stay quiet, stay calm, stay civilized. "We believe our technology and research capabilities could complement Zilithian strength," Lisa said diplomatically. "Together, we could achieve more than either species could alone." Vextel, second in command, a female Zilithian with blue markings on her scales, spoke up. "Your research? We have seen your research. You study plants and animals, right? Poetry about peace and love. You spend your time on useless things while real species conquer stars." Jake watched his people absorb the insults without reacting. Communications Officer Beth Kelly sat with her hands folded in her lap, though he could see her knuckles were white. Engineer Tom Brady stared at the table, his breathing carefully controlled. The morning session ended with no progress. The Zilithians had made it clear that they wanted complete control of the Kepler 442 system, and were willing to offer almost nothing in return. During the break, the human delegation gathered in a small side room. "This isn't negotiation," Ryan said quietly. "This is humiliation. They're not trying to make a deal. They're trying to break us." Alex nodded grimly. "It's a dominance display. In Zilithian culture, showing weakness invites attack. They're testing to see how much abuse we'll take before we fight back." "And we're not going to fight back," Lisa said firmly. "That's not who we are anymore. We're civilized people who solve problems with words, not violence." Jake said nothing, but he felt something stirring in his chest. Something old and dangerous. That had been sleeping for a long time. The afternoon session was worse. Vextel had brought recordings of human colonies, and he played them on the room's main screen. The videos showed human settlements on different worlds, with their small buildings and peaceful streets. "Look at this," Vextel said, pointing at images of children playing in a park. "Your kind builds playgrounds instead of fortresses. Why do you plant flowers instead of weapons? It is not the behavior of a species that deserves respect." The other Zilithians laughed. One of them made a comment in their own language that caused more laughter. The translation device didn't pick it up, but Jake could guess what had been said. Lisa continued to speak politely about trade agreements and mutual benefits. Her voice never wavered. Even when Vextel called humans evolutionary mistakes and failed mammals who survived by hiding in caves. As the day went on, the insults became more specific and more cruel. The Zilithians seemed to know exactly which. Words would hurt them most. They talked about human weakness, human cowardice, human inability to protect their own people. Jake found himself thinking about his daughter Katie, who lived on the colony world of New Haven. She was a teacher there, working with children whose parents had come from Earth to build a new life among the stars. The colony was peaceful and beautiful, with green parks and quiet streets where people could walk safely at night, according to the Zilithians, made it worthless. The final session of the day began at sunset, Nexus prime time. The stars outside. The conference room window had shifted. Jake could see the lights of ships coming and going from the massive station. Vextal stood up, his huge frame casting a shadow across the table. "Enough talking," he said. "Let me show you what real negotiation looks like." He touched a control on his armor, and the room's main screen lit up with a new image. It showed a human colony from space. Jake recognized it immediately. New Haven, where his daughter lived. "This morning," Vextal said, "a Zilithian patrol ship encountered this human settlement. Colonists tried to refuse us landing permission, said we had no right to be in their system." The screen showed Zilithian ships descending toward the colony. Jake's hands gripped the edge of the table so hard that his knuckles turned white. "We decided to teach them about rights," Vextal continued. "About power, about what happens when weak creatures try to stand against the strong." The video showed the attack. Zilithian ships firing on buildings, on streets, on the school where Katie worked. Jake watched in horror as the place where his daughter lived was turned into burning ruins. 347 humans died, Vextal said casually, including many younglings. "Consider this a demonstration of Zilithian patience. We could have killed them all." The room was completely silent. Jake stared at the screen, watching smoke rise from the wreckage of his daughter's school. His mind went very quiet the way it did sometimes during combat situations. Lisa's voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "You attacked a civilian population that violates 17 different galactic treaties." Vextal laughed. "Treaties are for species that can enforce them. Tell me, little human, what will you do about this? Will you file a complaint with the council? Will you write a strongly worded letter?" Jake stood up slowly. Everyone in the room looked at him. For the first time since the negotiations began, a Zilithian actually seemed to pay attention to what a human was doing. "Captain Morrison," Lisa said uncertainly. Jake walked to the screen and stared at the image of his daughter's burning world. When he turned around, his face was completely calm. His voice was quiet and controlled. "Hi, Commander," he said. "I need to make a call to Earth." Vextal's laugh filled the room. "Yes, call your homeworld. Tell them how helpless you are. Tell them how the mighty Zilithian Empire does whatever it wants, and there is nothing humanity can do to stop us." Jake nodded politely. "Thank you for the suggestion. I'll do exactly that." He walked toward the door, his diplomatic team following behind him. As they left the conference room, Jake's mind was no longer thinking about treaties or trade agreements or civilized behavior. He was thinking about his daughter Katie, about the promise he had made 30 years ago. To never let the monsters out of their cage. That promise was about to be broken. Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime with slow, measured steps. His diplomatic team followed behind him, but none of them spoke. The silence felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. When they reached their assigned quarters, Jake turned to his team. His voice was quiet and calm, but there was something different about it now, something that made everyone pay attention. "Ambassador Carter, please escort the diplomatic staff back to our ship. Dr. Turner. Lieutenant Commander Davis, Communications Officer Kelly, stay with me." Lisa looked at Jake's face and felt something cold in her stomach. She had worked with humans for 20 years, and she had never seen one look the way Jake looked right now. His eyes were completely empty of emotion, like winter ice. "Captain," she said carefully, "what are you planning to do?" "I'm going to have a private conversation with High Commander Vextal." "Jake, you can't. If you do anything to harm the negotiations." Jake looked at her directly. "Ambassador, the negotiations are over." They were over the moment Vextal decided to murder 347 civilians to make a point. "Please return to the ship," Lisa wanted to argue, but something in Jake's voice told her it would be useless. She gathered the other diplomats and left, casting worried glances back at Jake as they walked away. When they were gone, Jake turned to the 3 people who remained with him. Ryan Davis, Alex Turner, and Beth Kelly had all served with him for years. They had all sworn the same oath he had sworn, to protect humanity by hiding what humanity really was. Ryan, seal the corridor. No one gets in or out without my permission. Ryan nodded and walked to the control panel by the door. His fingers worked quickly, activating the station's security systems. Anyone who tried to enter this section would find the doors locked and the security cameras turned off. Beth, open a priority channel to Earth Command. Use the Phoenix authorization codes. Beth's face went pale. The Phoenix codes had never been used before. They were created for one purpose only: to tell Earth that the masquerade was over, that humanity was about to stop pretending to be civilized. Captain, she said quietly, are you sure? Open the channel. Beth's hands shook slightly as she activated her portable communication unit. She entered the codes that she had memorized, but hoped she would never need to use. The device beeped once, then displayed a simple message. Channel open. Priority 1. Phoenix protocol active. Jake took the communicator and spoke 2 sentences that would change the galaxy forever. This is Captain Morrison, UFS Horizon. The children are no longer safe. Remove the leash. The response came back immediately, in a voice Jake recognized. As Admiral Carter Stone, the head of Earth's military forces, understood, Captain. The leash is removed. All units are authorized to engage. God help us all. Jake handed the communicator back to Beth and turned to Alex. Doctor, I need you to prepare a full briefing on Earth's actual conditions. Real gravity, real atmospheric pressure, real geological activity, real predator statistics, everything. Alex nodded grimly. They're going to learn what a death world actually looks like. Yes, they are. And they're going to learn why the species that evolved on that death world spent 300 years learning to control their instincts. Jake walked back toward the conference room. His 3 companions followed him, but they all moved differently now. The careful diplomatic posture was gone. They walked like predators who had been pretending to be prey and were tired of the act. When they reached the conference room, Jake entered the access code that would seal the doors behind them. The Zilithian delegation was still there, laughing and talking among themselves. They seemed to be celebrating their successful humiliation of the human diplomats. Hi. Commander Vextal looked up as the humans entered. Ah, the mammals return. Did you call your homeworld to cry about how badly we treated you? Yes, Jake said simply. I called Earth. He walked to his chair and sat down. Ryan, Alex, and Beth took positions around the room. To the Zilithians, they probably looked like they were getting ready to resume negotiations. They weren't. Hi, Commander, Jake said, his voice conversational. I want to tell you about my planet. Vextal laughed. Your garden world? We know about Earth? Paradise planet with gentle weather and peaceful creatures? A world so soft that it produced the weakest species in the galaxy. Jake smiled for the first time since seeing the video of Danzu. New Haven, it was not a pleasant smile. That's what our files say, isn't it? Dr. Turner, would you please correct High Commander Vextel's misunderstanding? Alex activated his data tablet, and the room's main screen lit up with new information. Instead of the peaceful images that usually represented Earth and diplomatic files, the screen showed something very different. A massive hurricane, hundreds of miles across, tearing apart everything in its path. Lightning that could vaporize a person in milliseconds. Tornadoes that picked up entire buildings and threw them through the air like toys. Earth experiences weather patterns that would kill most galactic species in minutes, Alex said calmly. Category 5 hurricanes with winds over 200 miles per hour. Tornadoes that can lift objects weighing several tons. Electrical storms that generate billions of volts of energy. The Zilithians stopped laughing. Stella's yellow eyes narrowed. As he stared at the screen, Alex touched his tablet again. New images appeared. Earthquakes that split the ground open. Volcanoes that shot liquid rock miles into the air. Floods that covered entire continents. Earth's geological activity would be classified as extreme hazard by galactic standards. The planet's tectonic plates are constantly moving, creating earthquakes that can level cities. We have over 1,500 active volcanoes. Our magnetic field fluctuates so dramatically that it would interfere with most species' navigation systems. This is impossible, Vextal said. No intelligent species could evolve on such a world. Jake leaned back in his chair. You're right. No intelligent species should have been able to evolve on Earth, but we did. Do you know why? The room was completely silent now. Even the other Zilithians had stopped talking and were staring at the images on the screen. We evolved because everything on our planet was trying to kill us, Jake said matter-of-factly. The weather, the geology, the other animals, everything. So we learned to be better at killing than anything else. Alex brought up new images. These showed Earth's predators, great white sharks with jaws that could bite through steel, polar bears that weighed 800 pounds and could run faster than most vehicles, poisonous snakes and spiders and jellyfish that could kill with a single touch. Humans are not the apex predators on Earth, Alex explained. We became the apex predators on Earth. We hunted creatures that were bigger, stronger, and faster than us. We did it by being smarter, more patient, and more determined than anything else on the planet. Jake stood up and walked around the table. The Zilithians watched him nervously. For the first time, they were seeing a human move without the careful, restrained motions of diplomacy. They were seeing how a human actually moved when they weren't trying to appear harmless. "Hi, Commander. My species learned to hunt by chasing our prey across vast distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. We learned to track animals across terrain that would kill most galactic species. We learned to work together to bring down creatures that could tear us apart individually." Jake stopped directly in front of Vextal. The Zilithian was still taller than him, but somehow Jake seemed to fill more space. And then we learned to hunt each other. New images appeared on the screen: battlefields from human history, weapons that could destroy entire cities, wars that killed millions of people and left continents in ruins. "We became so good at killing that we scared ourselves," Jake said softly. "So good that we nearly destroyed our own species. So we made a choice. We decided to learn restraint. We decided to learn mercy. We decided to learn to be better than our nature." The Zilithians were completely quiet now. Their earlier arrogance had vanished. They stared at the images of human warfare with something that might have been fear. For 300 years, we have been learning to be civilized, learning to solve problems with words instead of violence, learning to hide the predators we used to be. Jake's voice became very quiet. "We wore masks, High Commander. We pretended to be gentle creatures from a garden world because we thought that was better than being what we really were." Jake turned to look directly at Vextal. "Thank you for reminding us why we needed those masks." Beth's communicator beeped softly. She looked at the display and her face went pale. "Captain, I'm receiving reports from across the galaxy. It's human. Fleets are moving, all of them." Jake nodded. "High Commander. Should probably mention that every human diplomatic mission for the past 30 years has also been a military reconnaissance mission. Every trade route we established included hidden supply caches. Every peaceful colony world you've been watching is actually a forward military base designed to look harmless." Vextal's claws extended unconsciously. "You're threatening us?"
No.
Jake said calmly. "I'm explaining to you what's going to happen next. In approximately 6 hours, a human fleet will arrive at the Zilithian homeworld. They will not come to negotiate. They will not come to establish trade relations." The conference room stayed silent for long minutes after Jake Morrison finished speaking. High Commander Vextal stared at the human captain with his yellow eyes, trying to understand what had just happened. The other Zilithians looked nervous, their claws scratching against the metal table. Beth Kelly's communicator beeped again. She looked at the message and spoke quietly. "Captain Colonel Sam Hughes's reports that Strike Fleet Alpha has reached the New Haven system. They've found the Zilithian ships that attacked the colony." Jake nodded without taking his eyes off Vextal. "What's the status of those ships, Officer Kelly?" "Gone, sir. All 12 Zilithian vessels were destroyed in 4 minutes and 17 seconds. No human casualties." Vextal's head snapped around to stare at Beth. "Impossible. Those were military ships with full weapons and shields. Your people don't have the technology to fight a real war?" Jake interrupted. "High Commander, you've been looking at our merchant vessels and transport ships for 30 years. You've never seen our warships because we didn't want you to see them." Dr. Alex Turner touched his tablet, and the room's screen changed again. And this time it showed video from the battle at New Haven. The images came from the human ship's cameras, showing the engagement from beginning to end. The Zilithian ships were exactly as Jake remembered them. Big, dark, covered with weapons and thick armor. They looked like they could destroy anything that got in their way. They were the ships of conquerors, built to terrify weaker species into submission. The human ships looked different. Smaller, sleeker, with lines that suggested speed rather than intimidation. They moved through space like hunting birds, fast and precise and deadly. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds, just as Beth had said. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed almost like dancing, staying ahead of the Zilithian weapons, while their own fire found targets with perfect accuracy. When it was over, 12 Zilithian warships were debris floating in space, and the human fleet hadn't lost a single vessel. How? Vextal whispered. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, more human ships were arriving at Nexus Prime. Not the careful, diplomatic vessels that other species were used to seeing, but sleek warships that looked like they had been designed by people who understood violence on a level most races couldn't imagine. Hi, Commander. Let me tell you about human military doctrine. For 300 years, we've been fighting wars against the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Our planet. We've learned to fight hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, and predators that make your species look like house pets. Jake turned back to face the Zilithians. When we finally turned that experience toward fighting other humans, we got very, very good at it. So good that we nearly destroyed ourselves. So good that we decided we never wanted to do it again. Its communicator beeped with another message. Captain, Admiral Stone reports that human fleets have engaged Zilithian forces in 7 different systems. All engagements have ended in complete human victory. Total human losses. 0 ships, 0 personnel. Vextal's claws scraped against the table. You're lying. No species can fight that well. No species can be that effective. You're right, Jake said calmly. No civilized species can fight that well. But we're not civilized anymore, remember? You helped us remember what we used to be. Alex brought up new images on the screen. Showed battles from across the galaxy, all happening at the same time. Human ships engaging Zilithian forces in system after system and winning every single fight. The thing about Deathworlders, Jake continued, is that we don't fight wars the way other species do. Other species fight to show their strength too. Prove their superiority, to gain territory or resources. We fight to end threats. Completely. More ships arrived outside the station. The Zilithians could see them through the conference room windows. Dozens of human vessels taking positions around Nexus Prime. The other alien species at the station were scrambling to move their ships away from the gathering human fleet. Captain, Beth said, reading another message, the Zilithian homeworld is requesting immediate negotiations. They're offering full surrender. Jake raised an eyebrow. Full surrender? Already? The battle hasn't even started yet. Vextal leaned forward in his chair. What battle? What are you planning to do to our homeworld? Nothing, Jake said. But I think your government has figured out what we could do if we wanted to. Alex touched his tablet again. The screen now showed the Zilithian homeworld from space. It was a beautiful planet with green continents and blue oceans, very much like Earth in appearance. Around the planet, a massive fleet of human warships had taken positions. Your military commanders are smart people, Jake said. They looked at what happened to your ships at New Haven. They did the math, and they realized that if humanity wanted to destroy your homeworld, there's absolutely nothing you could do to stop us. The images on the screen showed the Zilithian defense fleet, hundreds of ships, the pride of their military, the force that had conquered 12 star systems. They were staying far away from the human vessels, making no aggressive moves. They're not even trying to fight, Vextal said, staring at the screen. Would you? Jake asked. You knew that the enemy could destroy your entire fleet in minutes? Would you throw away the lives of your people for nothing? Beth received another message. Captain, I'm getting reports from across Zilithian space. Their military forces are standing down. All of them. They're requesting ceasefire negotiations. Jake nodded. Send a message to all Zilithian commanders. Tell them that human forces will hold their current positions. Okay? No further attacks will occur unless Zilithian forces take aggressive action. He turned back to Vextal. Commander. Your government has apparently decided that discretion is the better part of valor. They don't want to find out what happens when humans stop holding back. Vextal was quiet for a long time, staring at the images of his homeworld surrounded by human ships. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect. You could destroy us completely, couldn't you? Right now, today, you could wipe out our entire civilization. Yes, Jake said simply. We could. We could turn your homeworld into a dead rock floating in space. We could hunt down every Zilithian ship in the galaxy and destroy them. We could make your species extinct in a matter of days. But you won't. That's right. We won't. Do you know why? Vextal shook his head. Because we're not the monsters we used to be. We learned to be better than our nature. We learned mercy and restraint and the value of life. Jake's voice became very quiet. But you almost made us forget those lessons. You almost turned us back into the creatures we used to be. The conference room door opened, and Ambassador Lisa Carter entered with the rest of the human diplomatic team. They looked shocked by what they saw outside the windows. Dozens of human warships surrounding the station. And Zilithians, who looked like they had just learned what fear felt like. Captain Morrison, Lisa said carefully, I've been receiving reports from Earth's command. They're saying that Zilithian forces across the galaxy have surrendered without a fight. That's correct, Ambassador. It seems that High Commander Vextal's people are quicker learners than he is. Jake walked back to his chair and sat down. Now then, High Commander, shall we discuss the new terms of negotiation? I think you'll find that humanity's position has changed somewhat since this morning. Vextal looked around the room at the human faces watching him. A few hours ago, he had thought these were weak creatures that he could intimidate and control. Now he realized that he had been staring into the eyes of apex predators who had been pretending to be prey. What do you want? He asked quietly. Justice, Jake said. For the people you murdered at New Haven, reparations for the families you destroyed, and a guarantee that Zilithian forces will never again attack human civilians. And if we agree to these terms, then we go back to being the civilized, peaceful species you thought we were. We put our masks back on and pretend to be gentle creatures from a garden world. We go back to solving problems with words instead of weapons. Jake leaned forward slightly. But we'll never forget what we really are, High Commander. And if you ever threaten human children again, if you ever decide to test our resolve, if you ever make the mistake of thinking that mercy is the same thing as weakness, then you'll discover what happens when Deathworlders stop pretending to be civilized. Outside the conference room windows, the human fleet held its positions around Nexus Prime. Dozens of warships. Built by a species that had learned to fight the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Crewed by people who had spent 3 centuries learning not to be monsters. The masks were off now, and the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. 6 months after the Zilithian surrender, Captain Jake Morrison stood in a cemetery on New Haven. The colony had been rebuilt, but the memorial wall would remain forever. 347 names were carved into black stone, each one representing a life that had been taken for no reason except to prove a point. Jake found his daughter's name near the bottom of the wall. Katie Morrison, age 28, teacher. Below her name were the words she had lived by. Education is the light that drives away darkness. He placed a small flower at the base of the wall, a blue rose that had been Katie's favorite. Round him, other families did the same, bringing flowers and small mementos to remember the people they had lost. The cemetery was protected now. Above New Haven, a fleet of human warships maintained constant patrol. No alien vessel could approach the system without permission. No one would ever again attack this world and expect to survive. Jake's communicator beeped softly. He looked at the message and smiled slightly. The trials were finished. High Commander Vextal and his officers had been found guilty of war crimes by the Galactic Council. They would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Thinking about the day they decided to murder human children, a transport ship landed nearby, and Ambassador Lisa Carter stepped out. She walked over to Jake, moving. Carefully among the graves, her face was tired but peaceful. The past 6 months had been the busiest of her career, but also the most successful. The council meeting went well? Jake asked. Better than well? The reparations treaty has been signed. The Zilithians will pay for rebuilding New Haven and compensating every family that lost someone. Their military will be reduced by half, and they're banned from entering human space without permission. Jake nodded, and the other species. Lisa smiled. That's the interesting part. 12 different races have requested protection agreements with humanity. They want us to guarantee their safety from aggressive neighbors. And we said yes. We said we'd consider it. On a case-by-case basis, if they can prove they're genuinely peaceful and not just looking for someone else to fight their wars for them. They walked together through the cemetery, past rows of simple graves, marked with earth flowers. The colony had decided to plant a garden around the memorial so that beauty would grow from the place where sorrow had been planted. How are the other negotiations going? Jake asked. The trade agreements are proceeding smoothly. Funny how much more cooperative everyone became once they realized what human merchant ships were actually capable of. The Altarian Republic offered us exclusive mining rights to 4 systems. The Vex Union wants to share their technology with us. Even the Corvin Empire sent an apology for some remarks their ambassador made 3 years ago. Jake stopped walking and looked up at the sky. During the day, you couldn't see the human ships that protected New Haven, but he knew they were there. Across the galaxy, human fleets maintained their positions, no longer hiding what they were capable of. Any problems with the new arrangement? He asked. Lisa shook her head. None so far. It seems that most species prefer dealing with honest predators rather than creatures they think are weak. When we were pretending to be peaceful, everyone tried to take advantage of us. Now that they know what we really are, they treat us with respect. Fear, you mean? Respect? Lisa repeated firmly. There's a difference. We're not afraid that we'll attack them for no reason. They're afraid that if they attack us, we'll respond appropriately. A group of children ran past them, playing some kind of game that involved a lot of laughing and shouting. They were the new generation of New Haven colonists, kids who would grow up in a world where their parents didn't have to worry about alien raiders attacking their schools. Dr. Turner's report on galactic relations was fascinating, Lisa continued. Apparently, most species have been waiting for someone like us to emerge. Someone strong enough to enforce peace, but smart enough not to abuse that strength. Jake thought about that as they continued walking. What about the Zilithians? How are they adapting? Better than expected. With their military reduced and their government reformed, they're actually becoming productive members of the galactic community. Turns out that when you're not spending all your resources on conquest, you have time to develop art, science, and culture. They reached the edge of the cemetery where a new school was being built. The construction workers were human, but Jake could see alien observers watching the process with interest. Word had spread throughout the galaxy about human construction. Techniques developed on a world where buildings had to survive earthquakes, hurricanes, and volcanic eruptions. Captain, Lisa said quietly, I've been thinking about something. Do you think we did the right thing? Revealing what we really are? Jake was quiet for a long time, watching the children play in the rebuilt colony. I think we did what we had to do. We tried being civilized, and it worked for a while. But civilization only works when everyone agrees to be civilized, and when someone breaks those rules. Then you remind them why the rules exist in the first place. Lisa's communicator beeped with an incoming message. She read it and frowned. Slightly, the council wants to discuss expanding the human protection protocols. They want us to take formal responsibility for defending smaller species against aggressive neighbors. What did you tell them? That we'd consider it. But only if they understand what that means. If humanity becomes the galaxy's protector, then humanity also becomes the galaxy's judge. We decide who deserves protection and who deserves punishment. Jake nodded. And they're comfortable with that? They are now. 6 months ago, they thought we were weak mammals who could be pushed around.
Ow.
Now they know we're the descendants of persistence hunters who chased prey across continents until it collapsed from exhaustion. They've decided they'd rather have us as protectors than enemies. A message appeared on Jake's own communicator. Admiral Stone, reporting from Earth Command. The message was brief. Global Defense Network at full readiness. All colonies protected. No hostile actions against human interests in the past 72 hours. The galaxy is learning. Jake smiled as he read the message. For 300 years, humanity had worked to become better than their nature. They had learned mercy, restraint, and the value of life. They had put on masks to hide the predators they used to be, hoping they could become something more peaceful. The masks were gone now, but the lessons remained. Humanity was still trying to be better than their nature. The difference was that now the galaxy knew what that nature really was. Ambassador, Jake said, I want to ask you something. Do you think Katie would have approved of what we did? Lisa looked back toward the memorial wall, where Jake's daughter's name was carved in stone. I think she would have understood. She was a teacher, Jake. She knew that sometimes you have to be firm with bullies to protect the other children. And if they test us again, if another species decides to see how far they can push humanity, then they'll learn the same lesson. The Zilithians learned that mercy is not weakness. Civilization is not surrender. That when you threaten a human's family, you're not dealing with diplomats anymore. Lisa paused and looked directly at Jake. You're dealing with Deathworlders who have spent 3 centuries learning not to be monsters. If you force them to remember what they used to be, then you'd better hope your gods are merciful, because we won't be. In the distance, the new school's bell rang, calling the children inside for their lessons. They ran toward the building, laughing and shouting, safe in a world where their parents no longer had to hide what they were capable of. Above them, invisible in the daytime sky, human warships maintained their eternal watch. The masks were gone, and the galaxy had learned what happens when Deathworlders abandon their civilized facade. The lesson had been taught. The rules were understood. And as long as those rules were followed, humanity would continue to try to be better than their nature. But if the rules were broken again, if someone else decided to test the resolve of a species that had learned to hunt on the most dangerous world in the galaxy, then they would discover that some lessons only need to be taught once. The choice, as always, was theirs.